Good morning and welcome to the Standing Policy Meeting on Community Services for Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. My name is Councillor Vivian Santos. I will be the chairperson for today's meeting. I also have other city councillors, Councillor Matthew Allard, Councillor Emily Durand-Wood, and Councillor Cindy Gilroy. We also have members from the public service here, our senior committee clerk, Mr. Peter Prinsloo. Welcome. I want to quickly acknowledge that we are meeting on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homelands of the Red River Métis that we all have the privilege of living on. Also acknowledge our ancestral territory lands, and that our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake Band number 40 in Treaty 3. And want to acknowledge our partners, our neighbors in Treaty 5, where our hydroelectricity also comes from. If I can have somebody move the minutes of the meeting held on March 3rd, 2026 to be taken as read and confirmed. Moved by Councillor Allard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's carried. And we'll move right into delegations. First up is Councillor Lukes of the Waverly West Ward to be heard in support of 2 items. Go ahead, Councillor, you have 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you very much, committee members, for letting me speak here. I want to speak to item number 2, the award of contract for the construction of the new South Winnipeg Rec Campus Phase 1, and then also to the use of fireworks. So the award of contract for construction of new South Winnipeg Rec Campus. Every time I say this project, it's been a long project. You'll see if you go to the report and you read the report and you see the history in here. It's been 15 years plus in the making. We had a study done before I was elected on what the community wanted. At that point in time, the 2 community centers amalgamated. We had no idea the community was going to grow as fast as it did. Currently, right now in the Waverly West Ward, there is approximately 71,000 residents in the Waverly West Ward alone. This is a regional campus. It is designed to support a 4 to 6 kilometer radius. So not only will it serve the residents of the Waverly West, Southwest Winnipeg, but it will also serve a greater, larger area. So throughout the years, it started as a big field when I started here, and then we had to go through a whole process of the conservative government sold the land. It was going to be Manitoba Housing Development. They sold the land. Qualico bought it. We had to go through a big planning cycle. The land that was selected for the rec campus had to be expropriated. That was a whole process. We had to find money to build it. Anyways, very long, very involved. Many people helping on this. I just happened to be the one at City Hall, but many, many community members, Chuck Davidson, Ian Shaw, many, many community members helping on this. And we've reached the point now that the RFP went out. The tender is being recommended to go to PCL. And now because it's over a certain value, we're going through this process. So I'm asking that the committee supports this project. There is a very interesting risk factor in there. What was very interesting about this project was the way it was bundled. It was like, here's money for the rec campus, and the province at the time said, city, we also want you to build a vocational school, and city, we also want you to build a childcare facility. So that's been incorporated in the project. The childcare facility came in at a higher amount than the province had anticipated. So the province has promised that they're going to give us money to pay for the increase of the childcare facility. We're hoping they do. We're hoping they don't take it out of the SIB, Strategic Infrastructure Basket Fund. That is the risk factor, right? I'm willing to take the risk at this point. I'm willing to take the risk. I do hope, and maybe you can ask the department, that any projects also going forward that that we're footing the bill on ahead of time. I want to see this written into other reports, this risk factor sentence also. They wrote it into this report. And I'm going to talk to the CFO on that if there's other projects that we are footing the bill on, that I want to see this kind of sentence worked into it too, that it's a risk factor. Because after the last scenario where the province took some funding out of the strategic infrastructure basket funding. And we had to postpone projects or cancel projects. That concerns me. So I wanted to speak to that and ask for your support on it. And the other one is our fireworks, which we love so dearly. I think we've got fireworks people here. So I don't want the report to come back saying we need more people to monitor or we need more bylaw officers. I want the department, I want to hear what the fire paramedics department has to say, what their recommendation is. I do see that the fire chiefs across Canada recommend not having fireworks. These are explosives in hands of people that, I think we can educate them all we want, but that still doesn't happen. The education factor doesn't seem to sink in with some people. So I'm not sure how. I really don't know. That's not my job to figure it out. There's a lot of great examples on what other provinces are doing. My big concern in my ward, and I think other people that have naturalized retention ponds or that have a lot of density. Okay, one more minute. Just 2 more minutes, sure. Sure.
Legal reports, 2 more minutes, extension, all
Okay.
in favor, aye, it's carried.
My concern is we have all these naturalized retention ponds full of native grasses that dry out in the fall. My concern is fire along these ponds. When there was a really prolific year of the cottonwood trees having the white fluff, we had a fire in the forest because the fluff caught on fire. So this is a concern. We are densifying as a city. Do I want to ban them completely? No, I don't want to ban them completely. Do I want to ban them out of the hands of people that don't have a license or a permit? Yeah, I guess I do. Because in the city, there's very few places where we can have fireworks to begin with. So I know you're going to have probably a firework representative who's going to come from the industry and is going to say education, education, education. Well, we've been trying to educate people. You'll know Councillor Duran Wood for many decades on people to slow down. That doesn't seem to work. I don't know how we can educate people to not use fireworks. I don't know, but I'm very concerned about it. We have seen fires just last year of houses in other cities. So I don't want them to come back and say, oh, we need more staff to do bylaw enforcement. That's very difficult. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but so that's my presentation.
Great, appreciate that. Just some clarity on, I do have a question with respect to the fireworks. So if you're not looking for more people to hire, I think the issue is what you're even suggesting, whether it's putting like a buffer zone around residential areas, like no fireworks are allowed. There's still the enforcement piece. I think that's difficult to do. We could put all these rules and bylaws and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, we still need people to enforce. Because I think what you're talking about is true. It's happening. We know that they're shooting off fireworks at 2-3 a.m. in the morning in residential areas. What would you suggest we could stop that? We could put all these rules in place, but then we don't have.
Well, it's virtually impossible to catch a person in the act because the fireworks go off 10 minutes by the time you make a phone call, then the time, the response time. And honestly, the fire paramedics have major issues that they're dealing with, that fireworks aren't really in the top 10. If you're prioritizing what the issues are that they're dealing with, not in the top 10. So I think it comes down to restrictions of who can purchase them. I think it comes down to that. And maybe it's, I haven't thought this one through, but maybe it's, you want fireworks? Pay for your $75 permit? Well, I'm going to let them off at the lake or something. Well, fine. Pay for your $75 permit. And that might be a deterrent, or that might be something that people think twice about. I've not really thought that through. But it's impossible. Well, I think it is. We'll hear from the fire paramedics crowd, but I think it's impossible to police it. Because you literally have to catch them in the act. I mean, I had a video that I sent it around and people are letting them off right in their driveway. We knew the address, we knew everything, but if you can't catch them in the act, how do you enforce it? here's a little note, don't do that, you shouldn't do that. That's not working. It's just not really working. So,
Don't really necessarily want to be tattletaling on their neighbors. But I mean, if someone's showing a video, would you not just think that it could be evidence for the fire?
well, you can ask the department, because I did send a video off. I sent the person's name, I sent everything off, where the person worked. I don't know if they followed up. They probably went out and gave a warning.
Mhm.
I don't know how they actually enforce it, right? Like,
I had suggested in the media that maybe an increase of the fine, because right now our fine is only up to 500.
right, but how do you enforce that? How do you know the guy's doing it or the person's doing it? How do you find them if you can't prove that they're doing it?
Yeah.
Right? So
Well,
maybe
it's literally neighbors tattletaling on neighbors.
yeah, but then that's a rabbit hole. How do we know the neighbor's telling the truth? So I don't know. I just think that it really needs to be restricted more. That's my opinion, not everyone's opinion. But I'm very concerned about all these native plants and dried grasses that we have. And I mean, Councillor Gilroy, you've got high density, you've got old buildings, you've got empty lots. I'm sure people blast off fireworks on empty lots. I don't know, I just think we need stricter control. I don't know how to do that. That's not my role to figure that out. But I don't think adding more people on that end of the enforcement end is the answer. I think it's more diving into where people buy the fireworks. And I know we're going to hear all about education, and that's great. But to our point, Councillor Duran Wood, we've been educating people for decades to slow down. That doesn't seem to work. Maybe we ramp up the education on fireworks. I don't personally think that's going to work either. I think hitting a person in the pocketbook registers.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, go ahead, Councillor
I
Duran.
was just curious if, when you were doing your research on other cities, did you have one model that you kind of liked? Comparable?
Well, everyone does it differently, right? A lot of cities outright ban it, and they just do city approved. And if you look at the list that they've provided, the research that they did, I mean, every city does different things, right? So I think they want to go back and have more time on the report, but yeah, it seems like in the big picture of issues in the city, is this a big issue? No, it's not. But when someone's house burns down or when a whole neighborhood catches on fire, it's an issue. So yeah, it's one of these ones that, I get, don't you have anything better left to do than worry about fireworks? And I can do a lot of things. We at council can do a lot of things. We can deal with a lot of issues, okay? So,
Well, it's important to the constituents of Waverly West, and I know in mine.
and many areas,
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
calls all the time, so it is an
Yeah.
important issue. Any other questions? Nope, say none. All right.
Thank you very much.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next delegate, we have Chief Advocacy Officer Aleem Kanji from the Canadian National Fireworks Association. To be heard in opposition, I believe, Aleem, you're here on Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, members of council, staff. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me before I begin.
Yeah, we can hear you. Just got to turn it up a little bit. A little bit of
I can speak up if you want to, if that's better.
hold on, we're just gonna turn up the volume a little bit. I think I'm losing hearing.
All right. You just let me know when I can proceed. Thank you so much.
Sounds good, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak and spend some time with you again this morning. I did provide a letter which I will go over, and at the outset, let me just say that the deferral of this to 2027, it's our hope and expectation that we can actually work closer together on this to address some of the concerns and some of the issues. I wanted to quickly go through the letter that I provided. I know this will be coming back in 2027, but effectively the setback provisions that are in place really intertwine what rules should be in display in public events. The 100-foot or 30-meter clearance from all structures and property lines. And that's more predicated in our experience in bylaws across the country for display events, it's really important to note that when using consumer fireworks, the distances on actual products, not display, which would have for that larger setback, but for consumer fireworks, the distance vary from 1 to 2 meters. So it's nowhere near a 30-meter setback. And because you've got that rule in place, it de facto is a prohibition on private property, by virtue of what really is a unscientific setback. More importantly, it's actually in contravention of what our federal government does through NRC CAN. That rule that you have in place is at odds with federal authorization, Government of Canada regulations on the more than 4,000 regulated, approved, and tested fireworks products, which actually have the distance setbacks on the actual product. So by having this blanket display level setback in place, you're causing a lot of confusion to residents that continue to use consumer fireworks for their celebrations, events, taking out permits, etc. But you're actually not in compliance with federal rules. I have talked about previously education and cultural inclusion. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I will say that the permit-only system really creates a bit of a burden for folks that are using fireworks. A holiday waiver system, akin to what we see in other cities across the country, may be something that would be for consideration on the days where fireworks are permitted. That could relieve pressures on staff in terms of people applying, for permits on permissible days. I know there was comments earlier on fines by the chair. Certainly, we believe that there could be room for higher fines, and the fines are only good insofar as the enforcement aspect is concerned. So you really need to go out there and enforce the fine and make sure that people are following the rules. The notion that was referenced earlier by Councillor Lukes of using fireworks by the lake, and that neighborhoods are on fire, I think is certainly unconscionable. I don't think people should be doing that. I'm actually not aware of any community or neighborhood in the country that's been set on fire by fireworks, much less Winnipeg. So I'm not sure where that's actually coming from. But it's important that enforcement starts with education at the point of sale. By banning fireworks, I will say this again, you will strip out the ability to provide enforcement at the point of sale, where the industry can actually ask people what they're using it for, when they're using it, provide them with the rules around the bylaws, let them know, quite frankly, not to go use it and set them off at a lake or in environmentally sensitive areas that could catch fire, which I understand have been caught fire in Winnipeg because of fire bans, not fireworks. So it's important to provide that distinction. Stripping out, obviously, retail sales will affect, businesses and jobs. I've made that clear in the letter as well. Something to certainly pay attention to, and of course, people will continue to buy online or in other cities outside of Winnipeg. That's been our experience in cities across the country wherein bans are in place. We do see people purchasing online and outside of the municipality, as well as trying to create their own contraband product, which causes even more safety and concern.
Are you able to wrap it up in a couple of sentences? Do you need
You got it.
Minutes?
Yep.
Okay, well,
Absolutely.
Councillor Lard move extension for 1 minute. All those in
Yeah.
favor? Aye, that's carried. You got 1 more minute to finish up, please. And then
I appreciate that, Chair. I will wrap up. I know that the report relies heavily. Councillor Luce mentioned this earlier, right off the top, where she said fire chiefs across the country want to ban. Certainly that is very present in the report before you. It is very, very important to point out that despite that being asked by the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs multiple times, I think they're up to 4 times they've made that ask to the federal government of Canada, The federal government has explicitly rejected the request for a ban on the sale and use of fireworks. Aligning policy in the city of Winnipeg with failed requests for a national ban by a third-party association, I firmly believe does not reflect the desires of your residents, and it goes against certainly the volume of permit applications filed annually by those residents. There are a lot of questions that Councillor Lukes asked that I'd like to address and that she raised with your permission. I'd like to be able to respond to those questions and assertions if time permits.
Your time is up. Unfortunately, don't see anybody's hands up for an extension, but there might be questions for you. Are there any
Thank you.
questions for Aleem for our delegation? No questions. Sure, I will entertain maybe just what would be your response to some of the concerns that the previous delegate had asked of our committee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for the question. I think the comment off the top, from the previous delegate on the city not wanting to have more bylaw officers. We see this in cities across the country, right? It is very common to say that because bylaw is expensive, enforcement is reactionary to fireworks, and like other cities, the overwhelming majority across the country, fireworks are at the bottom of the enforcement list. So why spend money on this? And why not look to the solution, which is enforcement at the point of sale, where we can provide that information and that education right at the point of sale, which continues to happen. The assertion that was made earlier that education doesn't work, it's like saying, people continue to break laws by speeding. And so what do we do if they speed in their cars? Well, we issue citations, we go after them. We don't ban the operation of a vehicle, of an automobile, or bad parking, which is a top concern, of course, in cities like Winnipeg. We educate people and we enforce. And so enforcing that by relying on industry at the point of sale is a worthy solution for Winnipeg to consider in partnership with industry through our Be a Good Neighbor program, our vendor certification and employee training program, something that other communities have actually embedded into their bylaws. So I've mentioned this to enforcement and to the fire chief. That is for their consideration, if that is something they wish to do. And we certainly hope that those provisions will be looked at as this review is being done over the next year, and hope to be part of those discussions, with an active seat at the table to be able to input into this. In this instance, we actually did find out about the report after it was published in the media, which is unfortunate given staff had committed in writing to us and verbally that they would provide the report when it went public, which really was very, very, very unfortunate. The comment that was made that fireworks are not in the top 10 of complaints, again, we do see that in other cities across the country. And so I guess the question really is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Because you will not find solutions to banning things when your residents will find other avenues of using them and create more confusion for residents of the city of Winnipeg, and quite frankly, lose their faith in government when they find out that the ban actually doesn't work. That's the experience in cities that ban. They find that people are continuing to use them, complaints go up, residents get frustrated, and they lose their faith in the bureaucracy that can enforce and the political apparatus that passes bylaws which simply are untenable.
Thank you, Elaine. Really appreciate your comments. We'll take them into consideration and have some fulsome discussion with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedics when the item comes up at the end of our agenda. All right?
We look forward to being part of those conversations into 2027.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, seeing no further questions. Okay, none. Have a good rest of your morning.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, Seeing no other delegations, we will move right into reports. First up is the verbal update on encampment response protocol. I believe we have Chris Friends with us. Morning,
Good morning.
welcome,
Thank you.
thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. So just as a reminder for this one, on December 2nd, 2025, this committee directed the public service to report back with a monthly verbal update on the efforts associated with the implementation of the encampment policy. So I will go through the 3 indicators we typically report on and then take any questions that folks have. So first off is the number of sites actions since the implementation of the policy in November, and that's 20 in total. So what this means is that the property was flagged as a priority by the encampment coordination table, and 1 or more of the following steps were taken. Outreach provided dispatch to the site to make contact with the occupants and report back. City staff dispatched to the site to place signage and notification. Outreach provided offers of housing, and once confirmed, vacated the site was remediated. In addition to those outreach numbers, we also have the total garbage removal of sites. So 58 sites since inception have been remediated by the city. This includes some of the sites that were included in the previous number, but then also those that were vacated on their own. So the city had no involvement in that. They were just vacated. We were notified by outreach when out to clean the site out. Finally, we had just to report on our bylaw inspections and signage. During the reporting period, we had 90 site interactions. So for on-site inspections in total, since the beginning of the work, we've had just under 200, about 199 site interactions. Signs posted, we have 182 signs now posted in different places. I want to flag, and I think it's important to note that as we move into the springtime, we're taking an increased approach with this. So we're increasing the number of site visits. And what this means practically is that, for example, the number of times bylaw has visited a site has increased. So from November to March, that number was 108. Since the last time we came and reported, that number is 91. Combined together, it's 200. So it's a 300% increase. Not that that number means specifically much, but just know that we're increasing the number of times that we're going out and visiting these spaces, responding to 311 requests and your requests and direction as well. And then finally, flagging public service and working to develop a report to report back to this committee for May 4th, which will provide a written update as well as detail the resources used and associated costs from the introduction of the policy to date. With that, I'll pause there and take any questions from folks.
Yeah, go ahead, Counselor.
First of all, I did want to thank the public service. I have a major encampment in my area, and they came on site with Main Street project, and these are complex issues, but I appreciated them coming out and seeing it with me and being a part of that process. So just in terms of, we've now provided a new Main Street project is now going to be our only provider. Is there anything new within that provision that we've provided them that is going to help support the work now that we're doing, now that we have an encampment policy? What is going to be the change of what they were doing before, what their expectations are?
In my mind, the big difference with the RFP and the work is that the RFP is aligned with the policy. So whomever the mobile outreach service provider who was selected would have to align with that policy as well and work with the city. So since it was announced, we have met with MSP. We believe we've got a really good working relationship. There's a continuity of service that they're going to be providing that service prior to the RFP being released. And I think we'll be able to work well in moving into the spring to ensure that we're both supporting folks in communities, but then also doing our best to return public spaces as best we can back to.
So maybe just kind of talk at a very high level, if you can, about the processes, because now we're starting to get emails.
Yep.
Especially particularly along Waterfront Drive.
Yep.
We're seeing now the springtime is coming and encampments are coming. So what would be the response about what our process is gonna be? Can you kind of walk us through? I mean, I know we're kind of reiterating the encampment policy, but people kind of need to hear it over again. So if you could do that, I'd be greatly appreciated.
No problem. So at a high level, what happens is a request comes in typically through 311 or through some other means. Sometimes we'll get a request directly from yourselves. That request is received by our staff and then triaged into a list. We take a look at all of those requests, and the encampment coordination table will then prioritize them based on the criteria that's outlined in the encampment policy. We would then look to see which of those sites are of the greatest need, and then we would respond based on the site on a case-by-case basis. So it depends if the site's located in a park, a residential area, what have you. Typically, you would start with outreach going on site to get some situational awareness around what the site is like, how many structures are there, how many folks are there, have they been offered housing? Is there something we could work through our outreach service providers to immediately support them to move to a better space? And then from there, we can also, if there isn't already signage posted, we can have signage posted right away. And then we can also have our internal services, in some cases, bylaw services provide communication related to the space and this city's policy in whatever bylaw may exist in that particular park area.
I guess with respect to Waterfront Drive, it's an interesting and complicated area because I think certain portions of Waterfront Drive is designated a park,
Yes.
inter park space. Some of it I think is other designated as something else. I can't remember the name, escapes me. It's like just more like naturalized, not really a park. So there seems to be some confusion on what's priority 1 and priority 2. When do you guys, I guess, is it the outreach that goes and assess the area, or is it someone from bylaws that goes out and assess what they consider as a priority or priority 2? I guess I'll question.
That would be the city. Through the
city?
encampment
Okay.
coordination table, we would look at the site and then determine whether it's priority 1 or priority 2, based on its proximity to, a play structure, a school, is it in a park, as outlined in the criteria of the bylaw.
And I think the next question I saw.
Or not the bylaw, the policy, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I think another question I saw just recently, and I'll forward to you after this meeting. They're looking for more signage.
Yes.
Is that possible? Because I think, you can have it on one side of the park, but then not necessarily on the other side. So there seems to be some confusion. Is there an opportunity to kind of expand your signage on where they're located?
We are actively expanding the signage right now, meaning we are printing more signs. We are identifying spaces where signage needs to be included, and also spaces where signage has been removed and needs to be reinstalled. And then with that signage also comes education or communication to folks who may be in those spaces to say that this isn't the most appropriate place to do that.
And then right now we have 3 bylaw officers, or how many officers? do we have?
Currently, we have 2.
2? Okay, I don't have any other questions. Yeah, go for it.
Are the signs in the rail district in both official languages?
I can double check for you, but I believe they are. They would need to be. And if not, we can.
Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering if, like, for the public, if you can explain some of the complexities around the legal issues that the city is having in removing people, like why, like, I think people are trying to figure, like, why aren't you just removing them off the land? Can you maybe explain the complications around that so that public is aware?
Yes, I will do my best at a really high level. I'll also flag for the committee that I am by no means a legal expert, but the direction or my understanding of the situation so far is other case law from other jurisdictions across Canada have led to decisions whereby the charter rights, section 7 of the charter focuses security to life, liberty, supersedes any municipal laws, bylaws that we may have. So what we need, so that if we are going to enforce a law, bylaw, or trespass act or something along those lines, we need to offer housing, appropriate accessible housing to that individual. And we also need to demonstrate that the harm that is being caused by in that space is greater than the harm that would be caused to the person should they be moved. So at a high level, that's my understanding of it. So it takes quite a bit of work if we are going to be using any of our bylaws or laws, and it takes a lot of time. There are legal procedures related to all of this that take just have to, in some cases, taking sort of this.
It's, I know it's complicated. I think in Councillor Santos and our words, I know I have a lot of people that don't want to come forward and talk about what they're seeing in there. So they'll tell us maybe if we go there, but they won't like phone it in. So it's really critical that if there is really dangerous things that are happening in the site, that it does get reported to the city so that we can track that information, right?
That's right.
Just to kind of go over the numbers again, so right now, to date, since implementing the plan as of from November to March, you said there's been a total of 20 sites actions.
Meaning, kind of from start to finish, we've gone to those spaces via reach our own staff, and they have been either signage has been added, outreach has been has gone to the space. Housing has been offered, and then once vacated, the site has been remediated.
Could you talk a little bit about the partnership with the province of Manitoba? Because I think we also want to be mindful, and I understand the charter and the enforcement. We don't want to forcibly remove people until we actually have them either shelter, housing, and put them in right places and not just kind of moving them and shuffling them along. In your conversations with the province, I guess with respect to housing, do you happen to know, like, are they still working with us to give us some units that if we are moving people into housing, they're a willing partner with respect to that?
Yes, so as announced back February of last year, the city entered into a partnership with the Your Way Home Strategy. The key component, and I really want to be respectful of the province, not speak for them, but the key component of that was publicly stated was that the province is working very aggressively to try and build and bring online. We meet with the province weekly, several times a week in some cases. Every Monday we have a standing meeting with them, and we work with them to sort of think through and prioritize areas that are of key interest and priorities for both levels of government. We're hoping to continue that work. So I think right now we are very closely aligned with the work of the province. We're working, and we have a very good partnership with them, and we're going to be continuing that into the spring.
Okay. Yes. Has there been any discussions with the province? A lot of what is happening now is that we're putting people into very low barrier housing. And this low barrier housing is often owned by private entities. And so even within Manitoba Housing, if they're not the right fit in a Manitoba housing building, because they're very hard to house, lots of social issues, that gang activity and stuff, they get moved into the private ownership market. Has there been any discussions about supports from the Manitoba government into these buildings so we can ensure the safety of residents in those buildings and keep people housed so they don't end up back on the street because of the safety issues inside those buildings? Has there been any discussion about low barrier housing in particular that isn't owned by the Manitoba government?
A very good question. I don't have a good answer for you on that. I can find out and get back to you, but I wouldn't be able to give you a straight answer. Sorry, Councilor.
Any other questions? No, say none. Very thorough. Really appreciate it, and really am looking forward to the written report that's coming forward in March, or sorry, May.
Next meeting.
Yeah, May. Okay, if I can have somebody to receive the verbal, moved by Councillor Gilroy. All those in favor? Aye, that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to the item number 2, award of contract for the construction of the new South Winnipeg Recreation Campus Phase 1 tender. I believe we have several members.
Sure. Any members?
Maybe just for the record, if you can state your names and then we can move on to the
I'm
review of the report. Thank you.
Rob Taylor. I'm the Director of Assets and Project Management.
Good morning, Brent Buda. I oversee major capital projects for assets and project management.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Sawatsky. I'm the asset manager in community.
All right, I'm very happy to be here. As Councillor said in Councillor Luke's delegation, this has been a long time coming. So we're here to get approval to award the contract for the construction of the South Winnipeg Rec Campus with the affiliated daycare as well. The bids have come in. We need a budget increase of $9.256 million. And this is really for the provincial components of the project. We have commitment from the province that they will be paying this. As Councillor Luke's mentioned as well, there is a risk as to where the funding is coming from. We hope that it's not coming from the strategic infrastructure basket, but we haven't been identified, but there is a commitment from the province to cover their share. So just going over the top 2 recommendations, as I stated, just looking to increase the capital budget by $9.256 million, which will be reimbursed from the province. That brings the total project budget to $128 million from $118 million. And that we have approval to execute and award the contract to PCL Construction. I will also mention that at the last time this came forward to the major capital projects at SBC Finance, the Class 1 estimate that was done by Brent Panuta and his team, along with Sandra and her team at Community Services, we are within that Class 1, which is great. And if you look on page 4 or 5 of the report, it speaks to the 2 tenders that came in. And for a project of this size, to have 2 tenders come in at such a close range, it's a testament to the great work that these 2 people have done and their teams on this project. Thank you. Brent can provide more detail if you'd like on specifics of the project.
Any questions? Okay, so explain to me again to clarify, so the budget increase of the 9.256 million required for, I believe, one of the projects, right? Not both of them. I think it was outlined on page 4. So the city rec site is 94, so that is on budget. I'm saying that it was the provincial of Manitoba, their childcare site and vocational wing. There's an increase. So is it the childcare center that has increased? And could you explain why such a massive increase? That's quite a bit of money.
So I'll do a little bit. Brent can finish up there. So the vocational building component of the project is almost near completed. It's near commissioning at this point. And that was a little bit over budget. So we had to use some of the funding that was allocated for the 2 pieces of the project for the vocational building. So now when the daycare component came out, it came in higher than expected as well. So now we're asking for additional funding for that. Brent, further detail you want to provide?
Yes, thank you. So the history of the funding for the project goes back all the way back to 2019. And actually the province of Manitoba had established their budget back around the same time, actually 2020, and that's when council approved an amendment to bring these assets into the project fold. And so, of course, the project has lived through considerable adversity since that time. We lived through the pandemic, the associated impacts of the global supply chain, market conditions, and finally tariffs. So we received a Class 3 estimate in 2024 that put the entire project over budget, and we realigned the values to the current date. So being mindful of the project budget that was approved by council initially dates back to 2019. You could expect in 6 years there would have been an increase. What I can say is since then, the project team has worked very hard to keep the rec center component on budget through a lot of value engineering and scope refinement. As for the province has done the same thing. The difference with them is their budget never changed. There are commitments in place, but the budget is static from 2020. And so that is essentially the difference between the $24.7 million originally allocated by the province of Manitoba to this project.
I think I see a hand raised by Trustee Gilmore.
Yeah, in the provincial commitment do we have something in writing and that they wouldn't be taking it from the basket funding?
We do not. We have a commitment that they will fund it, but they haven't identified where the funding is coming from. So that's what we have highlighted, the risk that there always is the chance that they may come back and say it's coming from the SIB.
And then, just to follow up, and then if they do that, is it require a council motion, like what we've had to do before to change the capital budget? Or is this something that can be done internally, or how does that work? Do you have an answer for that?
I don't have an answer for that. I can look into that and get back to you, Chair.
Because I think in our current capital budget, we have not allotted SIB to this project. And if they were to come back in 2026 down the road saying, use it from the SIB, I have a feeling that is going to be another report that's probably going to come forward because we have to change our SIB allotment.
Yes, I'm looking over the corner of my eye at Mr. Jim Berzowski, the experienced director, who's advised me this will have to come back to council there if there is a manipulation of the way the funding is coming in from the province.
Sorry, Councillor Durand-Wood, go ahead.
Yeah, that's really my concern, is the risk to the consequences that it could have for the other priorities that have been allocated in the SIB. So I guess I just wondered, so you said the province set their budget for the childcare center in 2020? That
Correct.
okay, and it hasn't changed since then, but when was the last time that we had sort of any sort of official statement of support for the full costs?
I believe we had a letter from them from February, once the tender is closed, and we actually knew what the numbers are. February 26th was the last correspondence we had from the province to our CAO advising that they would cover cost for the increase to the daycare.
That was
As a
for this
caveat,
year.
they've never established the budget that they're working with.
Okay.
We don't know the budget between the vocational and the childcare center. The project team on the provincial side is considering it as a project together of two assets. So we're not privy to their information. And the funding commitment, which Rob spoke to, is a commitment to cover the additional costs over and above what they have pledged to date for non-amount.
Maybe just give me a timeline of, because right now I believe, my understanding, the vocational is underway, right? Is that almost completed?
Near completion, yes.
Okay, and we're moving on to the recreation and childcare center together, like what's the next, I guess the next step would be? What's the construction timelines?
So if council elects to award this contract at the end of this month, we'd be awarding a contract early May. Contractor, we think, would start sometime later in May or June. And we're expecting to be complete at the very beginning of 2028. Yeah. Having said that, we would have an update for council as requested based on an award. We would get an official construction schedule from the contractor at a later date.
But it doesn't report to this committee.
No, it doesn't.
It goes to
Finance.
finance. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other questions about the report? Saying none, we have a mover. Okay, moved by Councillor Allard to support the public services recommendations. All those in favor? Nay, okay, I support it. So that's a tie vote,
Yes.
okay.
So if someone is inclined to move another motion that would proceed up to EPC and council, we can do that.
Okay. Debate reasons why you're not supporting it.
Mine is like, I just don't feel after what the province has done with us with the last, basket funding thing, it's very loosey-goosey and not comfortable with it until we got, confirmation from the province.
There somewhere in the public service recommendation that could be amended to reflect those concerns? Like, how do we, maybe, I don't know if Tracy's here to speak to the SIB stuff, but.
I guess the one thing I can speak to is the fact there is difficulty in that. Typically, the province in past practice has not identified where the SIB funding is to be directed until near the end of the calendar year. Which does always create problems for us if we've allocated it somewhere else and then we're doing the shuffling around. So we can, I guess, perhaps follow up with the province to get clarification if they were willing to commit that this is a document from the SIB. But if we were putting in a recommendation that there would have to be a guarantee that said to come from the SIB, other than correspondence from the province, we probably wouldn't actually know potentially for 6 months, which would put a huge delay on this project. I know it's not a great answer. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Well, it's true. I just want to add though, that if a project of this scale and size and cost is delayed by 6 months, you're talking about an impact of millions of dollars in extra costs, just by inflation and escalation alone. So there is a balance to be struck by with decision making about how to proceed, but cover the city's interests with respect to the SIB.
Okay, well, if it's, obviously, if there's gonna move a motion, it's still gonna be tied. What happens then? Does it go up to council with no recommendation?
It will go up to EPC with that recommendation, and conceivably EPC would then make a recommendation to council.
Mhm.
So we can let's proceed up to EPC with that recommendation as is, unless.
It's gonna
someone wants
change
to-
it anyway, so.
Yeah. No, but I understand your concerns. I have very, very similar concerns,
Yeah.
but I trust the public service to continue working with the province. I think it's been noted here several times that our strategic infrastructure basket funding is been allocated already, and there's always that ongoing conversation. Hopefully the province is hearing us loud and clear that that we, you know, will continue to work with them. And this is an important project for them as well, because they're making a big commitment to daycare space and childcare space.
I think it's really important that they allow it. We have very little funding compared to the other levels of government, that when we allocate our funding, that is ours to allocate. And they can't make those dictations over us, and I think that that's really critical, you know, and yeah, I agree with you that they have skin in the game here too, and they should be wanting to work with us, and one thing is not, when we get a basket of funding, not to play around with it, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I guess it will go up. We'll keep the vote as is, and then it just goes up to EPC with no recommendation.
That's right, and councillors, I will report you as having voted in opposition.
Yeah. Thank you. Right, thank you for coming up. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, Winnipeg Public Library 2025. I believe it's a request for an extension of time. Do we need a explanation? We do have something from libraries here, but if you don't need required explanation, I would like to move her.
I would move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Allard to allow the extension of time for 60 days to be granted back. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's carried. Moving on to item number 4. This was a council motion, but then I believe it was referred to our committee for debate. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I do believe we have the chief here. If you require explanation, or you have any questions? If not, I'm fully aware that the mayor has been working with the province, especially Minister of Health Uzoma as Agora, to, you know, advocate for more paramedics, because shared health through the province of Manitoba does pay. But I mean, in my mind, there's no harm in doing another kind of all of council requesting that. But if you want further explanation on, you know, our paramedic complement, the chief is here to answer any questions.
I'm fine with this and moving this forward. I think we're all in the line. And we did a really good deep dive into our complement over the budget process, this committee, and yeah, I'm fine with pushing the province to properly fund them.
Okay, you okay with that, Councillor Gilroy?
Sure.
Is that motion to support this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's carried. Moving on to item number 5, Nature Smart Climate Solutions Fund. We have members from the public service here. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. We have Mr. Dave Domke, the manager of Parks and Open Space. We have Ms. Donna Prosiak, the project manager, And we have Miss Stephanie Whitehouse, the senior urban design planner that did some incredible work on this report and the funding concept. So with that preamble, we want to start with the executive summary and work our way down based on the where we're at with the climate fund and some of our options.
Great, thanks, Jim. And good morning. Yeah, we were asked to look at funding opportunities to fund the restoration and acquisition of land to establish new park space. This report is going to be received as information because the formal policy recommendations will be brought forward to the Standing Policy Committee of Planning and Development. It's within their authority, not this committee's authority, but this request came to this committee. This is all based on a number of our Winnipeg and the Winnipeg Park Strategies requests to add 1,000 acres of land to the city park inventory. So there's a number of mechanisms that we've talked about to achieve this funding, and I'll go over them very, very briefly, but it's quite a detailed report, so just bear with me for a couple of minutes. The first is capital budget, which on the restoration end is good news. We have a capital budget that's been approved for about $200,000 right through to 2030. Another request or proposal that we're putting forward is that there is funding put aside for parkland acquisition for a couple of pieces of property that we're looking at. $2.64 million in 2027 and $700,000 in 2028. The second kind of movement here is to look at special purpose reserve funds such as landscape dedication reserve. And we're looking at proposing to change the distribution of that LDR, basically from 75-20, 75 to the community where the development occurred and 25% to all the other community committees, to 70% at community committees where the development occurred, 20% to the community committees, and we're proposing 10% go towards this parkland acquisition fund that we're proposing. Another change that we're looking at is changing the land operating reserve, where right now 3% of the funding goes to tree planting. We're proposing that goes to this parkland acquisition fund. And the reason for that is that at present, the funding is solid with the urban forest strategy being approved and the funding that we've got approved from council recently. So that's why we're looking at that. This parkland acquisition fund is a whole new fund, a reserve fund that needs to be established. So that's how we're bringing this together. And that fund will receive funds from 10% of that LDR. Proceeds from the sale of other park property. When we're talking about sales of other park property, they're like fragments, low value properties. We don't expect there to be a lot of those, but it makes sense that if we're going to sell some of those, they go back into the reserve fund so we can buy some more park. And finally, really looking at the acquisition of the property, the responsiveness to acquire properties. Right now, if we are going to acquire a property, the CAO only has a $700,000 ability to purchase properties. So most properties, of course, are going to be over that value right now. We're proposing a $5 million limit. Why is that? To allow the CAO to have that authority. Because it's very difficult if someone's going to sell a piece of land, they're getting purchased up before we can even respond. And there are some strategic pieces of property like LeMay or Sumka as past examples that have gone very quickly and we haven't been able to take any action. Well, we haven't had the funding either, so to be fair, there's a couple of problems with that. But assuming we did have funding, we'd have the ability to purchase lands like that. So that's the brief summary, a lot of detail in this report. Once again, our thoughts are to bring this report forward to the Planning and Development Standing Policy Committee. In this case, we're going to have all the policies aligned in that report that relate directly to these proposed changes here. And then it will have to be, of course, debated through SPCPD, EPC, and Council. So with that, I'll ask my co-authors if I missed anything significant and plan to go to questions if there are any. Nothing, okay.
So there's a few things that I'm concerned that is kind of missing from this, so I wanted to get your thoughts. And I think, cause planning is very much, like, I'm scared of the direction that this has to go through planning, and I don't know if the clerks could talk about this, but like right now, for example, we have the Aubrey bus loop, right? Parks would like to keep that. It makes sense because we're now gonna be going back and paying money for land that we could be getting rid of. But our planning department, the best use of the land is housing. So like this is contradicting each other in terms of our policy. So my concern is how we, who just makes those final decisions, and maybe the planning department isn't the right final decision makers. Maybe it should go to EPC, which is a little bit more like balanced. So because the goal is for planning department is really the sale of our assets and our land, and they're gonna have a different opinion versus, so we have contradictory concerns, and then who makes the final decision is a concern for me. And then another thing that was really a concern for me is that what we're missing in here is really, like, we're looking at, for example, recognizing the most remaining natural areas lie beyond the built-up areas of the city, proactively acquire natural areas in the city's outskirts to protect these habitats. So, and from development pressures and anticipation for future parks. So why are we not in policy making sure that we are doing that in policy for future developments? So like, for example, our development agreements, that land comes from there. Why do we have to pay for that? Why aren't we enforcing it on the developers? So that's a huge concern. And then another concern that I had was that we're gonna pay for land, for schools. Like that should be the province. And in a lot of, like, from my understanding, that in a lot of other provinces, the province actually does that on its own. So why are we doing that? Why isn't the province paying the cost for that? So those are kind of like, so I kind of feel we missed the ball in terms of, I don't want this to be, oh, now we're gonna be spending money out in the suburban areas to protect that, when we actually can do that through our policies and developer agreements and stuff. And then where we're gonna need to spend the money is in the inner city, where we know we don't have the land, right? So I say that we have stronger policies in terms of our development agreement parameters on the outskirts, and then we have more money, enable to some more money for the inner city parks. And then I guess the concern is, what do? We have this park space that we could potentially be using and increasing our park space, but we're gonna look at selling it for $1 and we want to purchase it later on, so. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is there something we could make stronger policies around in light of that?
Sure, there's a lot packed into that question.
Yeah, I know.
And I'll start at number 1, but I question 2 and 3, I'll refer to these folks. But question 1, who makes the final decision? I mean, this is just the advice that we get because the organizational bylaw says that the basically land acquisition and deposition lies with PP&E at the end of the day. If this committee wants to make a recommendation to take it further to EPC, I guess that's your call. I mean, the full right. I was just saying how we think we were going to approach that. Fair enough on that question?
Yeah.
And then I guess the sort of the future park policy and future developments, I'll refer to these folks.
And just to the topic that you were speaking, the critical path, I think, for the report that's going to propose the amendments will go up.
Yeah, it'll end there anyways.
Yeah, it will get there.
Whatever path it takes.
Yeah, but where it's debated, I think it currently before the SPC.
Cause I do understand, like, if it's land that's already zoned parks, like, we need 2/3 of the vote, but what about lands? And I'll just gonna use Aubrey Lip as an example, that isn't zoned now, right? And so other people could be making decisions that have a different influence at the same time. It's contradictory to what we're doing. Like, we're selling land to purchase more land, like, it does not make sense, so just putting that on the table.
And through the green space plan, we have been looking at city-owned land that may not be under parks jurisdiction, but that may serve the benefit of parks purposes. And, you know, quick wins, and even some of those properties come with a price because some of them were acquired through tax sales. So this pool of money would also enable us in effect purchase our own land, pay back that came with that land. But as far as the rezoning, that we're looking at with the zoning bylaw state, particularly around lands that are not owned park that are operating as park. Through the green space plan, we're certainly looking for opportunities to acquire additional land. That's a tricky one, but we're looking at ways that we may be able to acquire and negotiate land acquisition with private land.
Like through the development agreements and stuff like that?
Yeah, we want that green space plan, you know, we recognize that a huge amount of the remaining forests and habitats are on future development areas. And we have policy that says that land is gonna be developed for housing and all sorts of things. So we're looking at ways to make sure we can balance all of our interests.
And currently we have to follow the development agreement parameters, which is maximum 10% is the dedication. So we just need to be the development parameters.
Yeah, well, the charter says we.
The charter says a minimum, the development agreement parameters.
You can say that
Oh,
again?
does it? Okay.
Yeah, at a minimum 10%, but practice hasn't been that, the subdivision bylaw says.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, no problem. And then, yeah, I think I touched on the point about, you know, land acquisition in infill areas and our interest. Areas with higher need areas, you know, it's much harder to purchase land in inner city areas and in, you know, infill areas. So again, that's where we would look to take opportunities where the city has potential park space like Aubrey Park, bare land, and see if we can convert that.
So just so that to clarify, I think I understand Councillor Gilroy's concern, but this particular report, if I'm reading it correctly, is not necessarily talking about city-owned land. This is talking about privately owned land from like developers that they own, so private entities or private property. And then these are solutions on how the city of Winnipeg could acquire those private lands and convert them into parkland. Is that correct in plain language?
There's portions of that correctness, because there is, it also talks about the sale of surplus city property as well. So it's not just private lands, it's city property as well. And of course, through the chair, Councillor Gilroy's identifying what's our priorities. We have many plans, and they all have a set of priorities that are established that have a level of importance, and it's up to council to facilitate what's the most important priority amongst many of these. So when you move these plans forward, this is your framework and your guideline to establish a funding opportunity for the acquisition of additional lands. That's the whole impetus of this report, is come back with the funding strategy and a way and a means to prepare ourselves for the day that comes when we can actually acquire some of this property, whether it's surplus city lands or other private opportunities. And the reason why that was asked was we weren't in a position to do anything with the Nature Smart Solutions Climate Fund at the time that it was open, which was a $1.4 billion opportunity across Canada, which has since closed and hasn't been reopened. But it was say, can come back and tell us how we could be more nimble in the future so we could be better prepared for this. And so that's the report that this group has identified a framework that needs there's some missing pieces in here. What I mean by missing pieces is the actual bylaw, the reserve concept and everything that would be moving forward at SPC PD, and then it's moving up through for council approval. Now just to add one more component. All these frameworks have a purpose and an intent, but there are so many that rely on the whole land use planning, what our authorities are in the Winnipeg Charter that has been passed down from the province, and what the province has authority to do and to implement over and above the city of Winnipeg. So that's council strategically has to understand that to make good informed decisions, or as best as they can within the authority that they're identified with. And when you're trading off today with the various housing requirements in our city as a priority mandate, and then you're debating that housing with future park land use, you really do have to be strategic, and council has to be on a 2/3 same page when it comes to that direction when these things move forward.
Another piece that I think we could be looking at, because we've made changes around our vacant building bylaw. And so we're looking at being more aggressive in terms of taking title, which is more money that we're looking at. However, I'm just wondering about, like, for example, right beside Central Park, there's a building that's been vacant for many years. I don't know if it's gonna ever be used again. So is there something in our policy to ensure that when we are taking title, and could it be used for green space prior to looking at the sale? Like, how you send that around to us? Thoughts on that? Because I think that like having that critical analysis is, we could be adding to Central Park all that extra green space, rather than just selling a property off.
Yeah, I want to comment after, but go ahead.
I think we would still need a budget, like if it's a building, like we still need a way to create, right? So this kind of acquisition budget, just also for the restoration of parks, which is why this also includes restoration.
Yes.
So one of the challenges through the chair to Councillor Gilroy, one of the challenges that we have right now, let's use 611 Lineside, for example, and look at that was being utilized as a community garden space, right? And right now it's housed at the moment. And so when we talk about properties for sale or the demolition of a building, what would be the strategy to maintain that before something occurs? So you protect the beauty of the space for a period of time until a development occurs. And so that's been missing in those removal and replacement. But again, that's a council direction that says here's a step in our priority as we transition to whatever that future is. So how do we maintain in our city and protect those assets until such a time? We have parking lots as an example in the city in Osborne area where it's being sold, and then currently instead of it being some form of green space as a temporary entity at right at the corner of just off of Wardlaw and Osborne there roughly, right now there's just random individuals parking there without any revenue coming back into the city and actually not really being managed by the city. And so, what do you do in the interim? If it's going to be 6 months to the sale, or it's anticipated to be 2 to 3 years down the road, they would trigger kind of like a temporary service. But we would need funding, as Stephanie identified, to support making that work. Like 611 Langside, what are we gonna do with it right now? If it's vacated, how are we gonna be nimble to approach that when it could be sold
It's
for
gonna help.
transition?
There's a.
Well, I was there on Friday night and I do have some ideas, but the opportunity there is to try and make sure that we get it back to the Spence neighborhood and get community gardens which is what it was serving for a period of time before it's sold. But again, there's funding required and then there's authority within that that would had to be transitioned as part of the sale or the surplus of that entity.
So in this, like in the building of the policy around the funding, I have concerns with some of it, but are we able to put in there, like, so that it isn't discretionary of council at the time, but like stricter policies around like not using the LOR at budget time, right? That, you know, to balance our books, like stuff like that would help.
So through the chair to you again, Councillor Gilroy, the council has a 2/3 ability to change most anything that's not imposed by the province of Manitoba. So when it comes to land dedication reserve and what its original intent was, that's approved by council. You still have the ability with 2/3 of council approval to make that change to spend it on something else. So we would not be in the authority to make that proposal. That would be a council approved direction to make that decision on the various land use plans.
And that's one of the reasons we're proposing this parkland acquisition fund, to separate those funds off and to try and keep them protected for land acquisition.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I like this report. The one concern I have is the land dedication reserve source for the funding. I think with that in mind, I'm planning on voting no. I know it's symbolic at this point, but I don't want to see the council land dedication reserve funding be limited. I guess the $840,000 over 5 years, about $56,000 per ward, and I know that that's been very useful in St. Monica's ward and to fund the writing project. So I like the report. I don't like the funding source.
And I feel the same way, and I'm also concerned regarding like taking money out of our trees funding. You know, like I know we have to fund this, like I do believe that, but that's like trees should be considered our infrastructure. And if we're taking money from our trees to do this, that's kind of concerned. Thoughts on that?
So, yeah, number one, council has approved an urban forest strategy. We're planting trees more than like 3 to 1 right now, 2.5 to 1. So we really don't need that funding at this point in time for tree planting. So the whole idea, and I mean, I've talked to the city forester about this too. And these folks, we'd rather buy an area with a complete urban forest cover of riparian area with beautiful elms and linden forest. It's much more beneficial than planting some additional trees.
That's pretty weird though.
Pardon me?
Right? Like, that's wonderful in areas that haven't been developed yet, but in the inner city, new trees are really important.
Well, we're already meeting the requirements to plant the trees, exceeding them in fact, to plant trees in even older areas of the city.
Can we? Well, this one's counter Emma's point, which would be like looking at that funding source in order to buy riparian area instead of land dedication reserve funding, but I don't think that has councillor come out with support.
Well, there's a number of policy initiatives in here. And I think some of you support some of them, but some of you don't support all of them at the end of the day. So I think you have to decide how you want to move forward with that. My thoughts, and they're just my thoughts, I'm not a counselor like you folks are, is to move this this report ahead and let the debate happen at council where it's gonna happen eventually anyways. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, just so everybody's aware, this doesn't move up to, it would be the SPC report when we provide the proposals. This is just ends here at community services.
Yeah, go ahead. I have, few questions and comments. I'm just trying to figure out what order I want to ask them. Yeah, so I guess, first of all, thank you for the report. It's very creative. You're trying to find solutions. I think this is really important. We need to have that fund there so that we can move when we have opportunities to leverage other federal funds or when things come up for purchase. So it's really important. I really support that. I am concerned about that 3% for the tree planting. You know, it took a lot to get the urban forestry strategy funded, and right now things are going well with the replanting, and I'm really happy about that. But I also know, like, now Emerald Ash Borer is, you know, back up again, and there's a new elm threat. So I just think like it's not the time to be letting up on that investment into to tree planting specifically. I think it's just going to become more and more important. So I have trouble with that one. The LDR, I also share that concern. It's already such a small amount that comes into our LDR funds. And I think also with the Wilson corridors, that's also reducing the amount of dedications that are going in. So it's like, yeah, it's concerned about that. I think they're really, so I guess I'll get your take on this. The really core thing to this is the initial capital amount, right? Because if we don't have that piece in place, it's just kind of drips and drabs into a fund. Is that right?
I'd say both, because the dribs and drabs are important if we want to
For long term.
move on any kind of property, even a donation of property. We need some dribs and drabs in order to get an assessment. So without that continual funding to the fund, there is a little bit of concern, but then also the capital investment is very important, yes.
And so what's being proposed for that is a capital ask, right, in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. And also that 3% from the land operating reserve. Maybe you can explain this to me, like, what's the order of priority on accessing the money that's in the reserve?
That's part of one of the report. It's part of one of the policies that will come next.
Okay.
In the park,
Yeah.
parkland acquisition policy. Right.
Right, okay. So just be concerned that if other, you know, priorities have priority from this fund, then is it reliable?
It points also to the parks strategy, which outlines all the priorities for acquisition, including here this poverty, downtown, and a whole bunch of priorities, protecting natural areas. So you have policy in the park strategy that speaks to that, and that definitely form the priorities.
Okay, yeah. The last thing, this is just a general thing, like, as you're thinking about acquiring land, do you have any just general thoughts on, you know, whether those spaces wind up as more formal parks or just more passive parks? Because I know there's sort of like long-term maintenance of applications too. We're already kind of having trouble keeping up with our existing parks. So just thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as Stephanie said, like park strategy does talk about that. We're certainly focusing on some maybe a little bit more natural areas at this point in time. That has been our strategy, but that's not to say if opportunities it require, if there's an area of the city that is underserved by parks, by just turf parks or athletic fields, we'd still be able to look at that there's just not a lot of land to purchase at the end of the day. That's why we think something needs to be put in place. If we don't do anything, then we won't get any parkland.
Any questions? Concerns? No? Okay. Do we have the mover for to receive this information?
Well, I'm planning on.
Well, okay, maybe if, someone can take the chair. Okay, so, just wanted to put some quick comments on the record, but, really appreciate the work that your department does. It's not easy, to, look at ways to, acquire parkland. We have a target of 1,000 acres of new parkland. And so we either look at private land or city land. And with spearhead from yourself, Shauna, and Stephanie through the green space and natural corridor secondary plan, that looks like that will be coming forward in, later on this year, hopefully. We're not too sure. But obviously there's more work to be done. A lot of the steps and proposals here are controversial. I'm not supportive of all of them, but without increasing property taxes, we don't have a dedicated fund to actually acquire parkland. So you've been tasked to find what tools do we have in our toolbox already for certain policies to find ways to acquire and purchase parkland. And I think you've outlined that as clear as you could. It's a little bit complicated, as we can hear from the back and forth. It is challenging, and who is responsible, who's not responsible. And it is quite frustrating. I'll admit that community services tends to deal with a lot of park space, but then you have to go to PP&D to deal with the real estate policy because land ultimately belongs under PP&D. And I think this may be something we could bring up to the CAO about what is that continuous improvement? Like, we need some cohesion and some consistency on where a lot of these reports go to, because it starts to get really, really complicated. And I agree with you guys. It's kind of like who has the jurisdiction over this, but the charter, it is what it is. And yeah, so really supportive of what this is going forward. I really encourage people that, actually one question. The report for the standing policy for PP&D, where you have the policies coming forward and the recommendations, when is that coming forward? Is that coming later on, like next month or June? Or like, how is that?
Yeah, that's our intention, but that being said, Councillor, as you know, Jim Berezowski and Dave Domke, Shauna and Stephanie don't control the political agenda, so
Okay,
we can't.
so it could be May or June of
Yes.
this year with certain policies.
May's gonna be tough because the PP&D meeting is just a couple of weeks away right now.
Okay, so possibly June of
Yeah.
2026. Okay, okay.
Can I ask,
Well, he's the chair.
so.
And I was gonna, I'm moving the motion. Those are my comments on why I'm supporting to receive this as information. So I move that motion, and then now we can,
Discussion.
yes, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, sorry, just looking at you. Just in terms like, because this says receive it as information, right? So does that mean you're gonna go forward with this? Could we ask you to do a little bit more? I guess, or can we take stuff out? Like, can we take out the LDR and then ask you to do more around, when we're. Like, I know that you have to stay, within your parameters, but why don't you push back and say, council, maybe you should look at increasing the amount that, developers have to pay in lieu of and stuff like that. Like I'm kind of looking for some guidance around that.
Administration, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a number of initiatives ongoing right now. Councillor Gilroy we have the comprehensive zoning bylaw review going on over the next 18 months. That's a lot of the items that you've referred to probably have merit in there somewhere, not totally, but somewhere. The green space master plan is probably key to all of this. And the challenge is that this is the concept of how we could possibly as a city prepare ourselves for the acquisition of property. Those master plans and bylaw reviews will ultimately give a lot of direction as to how we're gonna work with that. Still need to fund it. And that's the piece we're looking for here. This is to be received as information. It's not a directional. So to say, well, we're receiving this information, but we don't want you moving forward with LDR as a concept, a distribution of funding concept, or the trees as a distribution of funding concept. When you bring forth your policies to SPC, that would be receive this as information and then an amending a motion moving forward. But you have to ask the clerk if that's even realistic.
Assuming the report that will be at PMD goes up to council, there will be an opportunity for members of council, either at PMD, EPC, or at council itself, to amend the recommendations. So if there was an appetite to remove the LDR portion, we could amend that at council with the appropriate motion.
And to further elaborate on that, we all know on our side that would have to go to council for final approval on the bylaw and the policy. Yeah.
So in that case, after hearing from the administration, I'm comfortable with supporting Councillor Santos at this time, knowing that I can really make.
And I sit on PP&D and I can make a commitment that I know the LDR is a very controversial issue. So, and as an inner city councillor, we rely heavily on LDR to do some.
I just think in some places we could be doing a little more.
Sure.
In terms of our development agreements that we don't seem to want to touch, so that's kind of my concern, yeah.
Any other speakers? Call the question on the motion, all in favor? Okay, so there's 3 ayes and I'll be reporting opposition. And give the chair back to Councillor Santos. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 6, approval to apply and accept federal funding for Living Prairie Museum from Young Canada Works Federal Funding Program.
Go ahead.
Thanks. This is fairly straightforward, I think. Council agreement is required to enter into grant agreements, and we're asking in this particular case for Young Canada Works in heritage organizations to work at Living Prairie Museum, doing interpretation, things like heritage interpretation, like local history, indigenous reconciliation, natural heritage. So the recommendations here are to allow us to apply for the 2026 grant. An agreement that is required for this grant, as well as apply in future years for this grant. That's it.
I'm ready to move this further.
Okay, any questions, no other questions? All right, all those in favor of Councillor Lard's motion?
Aye.
Aye, and that's carried. Moving on to item number 7, new fee for adult cricket field rental. Go ahead, Dave.
In this particular case, council approval again is required for changes to fees and charges. We're looking for that change in fee and charge in this case. Currently, athletic fields are rented based on 4 to 5 hour blocks throughout the day. The Manitoba Cricket Association is requesting something less than the block because they want to use fields for much longer. At the same time, the 2018 athletic review talks about hourly bookings, that would be more efficient to use space and time. And so what we did to ensure that we could consider these hourly bookings, and the MCA agrees with this hourly booking, by the way, but I had to check with the other sport groups. We conducted a brief survey, which most of the other groups were neutral to positive to changing to an hourly fee. The hourly fee being $21 and a few cents, $21.56 per hour. So in 2026, we're saying most of the fields technically are actually already booked under block booking, but there's a few groups that are going to want to go to hourly. We'll work with those few groups and work with the existing groups, leave them as block booking. But from 2027 onwards, we're going to convert 100% to hourly fee and working with some of those customers that are concerned. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Councillor Gilroy. All those in favor? Aye, that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 8, use of fireworks on private and public property. Now, Lucy Gilmore and Chief Smith.
Morning.
Good morning. Before we move on, Chief, I'm saddened by the news that you are retiring. I'm gonna cry. At the end of this year, I just want to put some words on the record that what you've done for this service has been tremendous. You've done some amazing work challenging work to reconfigure some of the things that we've done. Even though I've only been with you for 2 years, I want to say that thank you. You've been amazing with me, like going back and forth on many challenging files, especially the fires, the underwriter survey, all the strategic plans, come to this committee and provided really good and honest opinions with respect to firefighters and paramedics. I will miss you. So you got tough shoes to fill, I know, but I know your executive team will be able to pick up where when you depart. But thank you. Just I don't know what else to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'd just like to thank you as well for all the support and all of your council colleagues across the city. The level of support that we've received has really been exceptional and allowed myself and my team to do the good work that we need to do. Sometimes hard conversations, but always respectful and collegial and all coming from the right place. So I very much thank all of you for contributing to that. It's been a fantastic career, 33 years with fire paramedic service, 7 prior years with Parks and Recreation Department as a summer student. And 2 of that as a volunteer. I started with the city when I was 15. So it's been a fantastic ride and I thank you all for being a part of it. Thank you.
All right, let's move into a challenging one. Fireworks and
Sure.
yeah. So, go ahead.
Just before I start, and while we're giving thanks and appreciation, I'd just like to acknowledge that this week, April 12th to 18th, is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So I'd like to take this opportunity with committee to thank all of our 911 communications professionals for their dedicated resilience and unwavering commitment to keeping Winnipeggers safe and our responders here in our community in times of need. So thank you. The report before you today is we were asked to review how other Canadian cities regulate the use of fireworks. Our review found that many cities use different rules and fines to do this. Some cities allow fireworks only on specific dates, as we heard earlier from delegation, and others require users to have special training. And as we also heard earlier from delegation, some limit and ban fireworks altogether. Our review of jurisdictional scan confirmed that the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service already has extremely strong bylaw provisions in place for the city of Winnipeg. What has been acknowledged is that enforcement has been challenging because of a number of things, including our number of staff and the resources required. We also heard some of that from delegation this morning as well. In terms of recommendations in this report, the public service is intending to report back in the first quarter of 2027 with enforcement options based on this jurisdictional scan and in alignment with the bylaw enforcement strategies implementation and any future consolidation model for bylaw enforcement. In November of 2026, it's my understanding that there will be a bylaw enforcement strategy report coming forward to committee and council for review. And we would like to ensure that we are in full alignment with any recommendations related to bylaw enforcement that come forward in that review. In terms of implications for these recommendations. There's no financial implications to this report. However, improved enforcement necessitates having adequate resources in place for enforcement efforts. The department may request additional fire prevention full-time equivalent positions in future budgets and negotiate changes to hours of work provisions within the current collective agreement and collective bargaining unit agreement for fire prevention officers. We will also be exploring additional delegation authorities for on-duty operational chiefs. These are delegated operational authorities that come from the fire permit chief as outlined in bylaw 35, 2017. In terms of what we were asked to do for the jurisdictional scan, one of the things we identified was the comparison of fines for use of fireworks without a permit. You'll see in the report and the addendum material that Winnipeg right now has a fine of up to $500 and there's permit requirements. Permit holder must be 18 years of age and older. There must be 100 feet of clearance from all buildings and trees, and there must also be written consent from the property owner. We also have some close comparators to look at in the report. So for example, Calgary, Alberta has fines starting at a minimum of $500. However, in Calgary, these move up to $1,000 a day, and in some cases, maximums of $100,000. Edmonton, Alberta also fines up to $10,000. Again, all of those details outlined in the report. We found that many cities have multiple penalties depending on the circumstances of the fireworks. As an example, there may be a $250 base charge for setting off fireworks without a permit. An additional charge of $1,000 may apply in dangerous situations such as near a building. The summaries provided in the report have tried to capture the varied nature of the fine structures across other jurisdictions. The average initial fine from cities included in the scan is $448, and again, Winnipeg's current initial fine is $500. In terms of specific provisions from other jurisdictions which govern the use and sale of fireworks on public and private property, we found that in terms of this, there was a lot of detail. So we've included that in the appendix of the report. Due to the volume of the material and the variety of approaches. So we thought it important for that to be included in its entirety. There's also fireworks allowed on certain dates. So this would involve date restrictions, and these are often in other jurisdictions enforced not through the fire prevention bylaw, but through noise bylaws that other jurisdictions have put in place. Other options are having required licensed technician for setting off of fireworks. This would require a licensed technician outside of any allowable holidays. Other regulations that we have found across Canada included the complete ban on the sale of fireworks, fireworks resellers requiring proof of a permit prior to the sale of fireworks, and fireworks allowed on private property only when certain space requirements are met. There were other considerations that we also found. This included considerations around use only during a cultural celebration of holidays. In terms of fireworks and noise, the review found that the noise can cause and may resemble explosions and can be triggering for individuals who have served or lived in conflict zones across the world. This becomes very important in Winnipeg in consideration of some of the newcomers to our city from zones of conflict. And as well, we found that both domestic and wild animals are impacted by fireworks, with many animals panicking and found to be abandoning their young and becoming lost during fireworks events. And the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association has also generated some documentation in this regard. In terms of current status and fireworks actions to date, So this has been an important topic that's been talked about in our city, and fireworks use is governed by the City of Winnipeg Fire Prevention Bylaw currently. To be eligible for a permit, again, the applicant must be 18 years of age. There must be 100 feet of clearance from all buildings and trees, and there must be written consent from the property owner. The fact of the matter is most properties, private properties in the City of Winnipeg do not meet these clearance requirements. Residents who set off fireworks without a permit may be fined up to $500, but again, this is very challenging to enforce with the current fire prevention resources. There are currently 19 fire prevention officers within the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. These staff members, by collective agreement, work daytime hours in accordance with the collective agreement provisions. In 2024, the Fire Paramedic Service undertook direct public engagement campaign in the fall around firework awareness and safety. This had some beneficial results, which I will ask Assistant Chief Gilmore to speak to later. This campaign was highly effective in decreasing the number of firework-related calls, but there were still a number of firework violations noted and reported, some of which we heard from delegation this morning. In terms of potential options for the control of fireworks, so one of those options is, of course, the complete ban and sale of the use of commercial fireworks. That would align with some other large Canadian municipalities. The ban would apply to fireworks that are intended for recreational use by residents. This would not apply to professional fireworks displays. This option would require us to proceed with changes to the fire prevention bylaw, including enhanced enforcement that would allow property owners to be charged if the fireworks occurred on their property. And we would suggest that fines associated with such violations could range from $1,000 to $5,000. There is also the option for looking at revisions to our current bylaw and improved enforcement. So these revisions to the current bylaw could include firework-free zones, increased fines, and increased enforcement. Firework-free zones would include parks and requested spaces by residents, similar to the insect spraying buffer zones that we have in our city today. Again, fines would range from $1,000 to $5,000. Additionally, under the current bylaw, there are provisions for designated employees. So this means that the fire paramedic chief of the City of Winnipeg and any employee of the city to whom the chief has delegated in writing the authority to enforce or administer all or part of the bylaw, they can be provided with delegated authority. And this would assist us for managing some of the enforcement outside of the regular fire prevention hours of work. In an effort to increase enforcement, delegation could be provided to operational and chief officers working in fire suppression on a 24/7 basis, providing for greater opportunity to address violations and issue fines in a timely manner. And additionally, other enforcement options would be explored through the bylaw enforcement strategy. That concludes the summary of the report. I'm going to turn over to Chief Gilmore to provide a few comments as author of the report. She has a lot of knowledge with this. Before I do, I would like to address the one comment from our second delegation this morning regarding their knowledge of the report through media. And I just like to acknowledge that we were made aware of that, and our staff member did reply to delegation. And the reason for what occurred was due to illness, staff illness on the day in question, where the reports were publicly posted, and that was communicated to delegation. So unfortunately, that wasn't shared with committee earlier, and I'm sharing it now. So thank you.
I can just add a few more details around the numbers that we can see in Winnipeg from our staff. Around the education piece that we did in 2024, we were able to use some numbers from our operational crews that had a cultural background, especially around Diwali. And we spent a lot of time going out and speaking to cultural centers and community members about fireworks safety and encouraged a lot of larger celebrations as opposed to smaller individual celebrations. We did see that reflected in the numbers of calls received in 2024. We attempted to do the same program in 2025. Unfortunately, due to scheduling, we couldn't go out as close to the date, and we found it had very little impact. So we think it is timing as well, getting out as close as possible to the date. And we just didn't have people available due to other issues. And then just around numbers, so we did change, I think on page 10, there's a bit of a chart there. We did change how we dispatch the firework calls, given the number we were receiving. So we do only dispatch when we're reported that fireworks have hit something or something is on fire, not that there's just fireworks going off in the neighborhood. So that has decreased the number of calls we've attended, but we're still seeing in 2025, 306 firework calls, 2024, 256, and in 2023, 282. And then we also have the numbers here of how many permits we've actually approved and how many we've rejected. And the number of calls received exceeds the number of permits approved and rejected in all years. So that would lead us to the conclusion that a number of people are not even trying to apply for a permit.
So I guess, yeah, my question would be then the people who are purchasing the fireworks from the store is not issuing the permits or not, like I feel like it's the onus is on the store to either do an education or issue the permits. You cannot sell, you should not be selling, maybe I'm kind of over speaking, but should not be selling fireworks unless you come in with a permit. Is that kind of correct to assume?
So the permits are through the fire prevention office.
Okay.
So you have to take out a permit with us. And then you have to show where you're going to be setting off the fireworks. And in many cases, people can't, if they don't have a safe space to set off the fireworks. The stores currently do not require proof of permit to buy fireworks. We did look at that as an option. When we were writing the report, it is challenging given legislation here in Winnipeg and versus Manitoba, because if you just go outside of Winnipeg, there's a bus that's on the highway often during the summer that's well known that sells fireworks. So you could buy the fireworks there. They wouldn't fall under Winnipeg regulation. You could still bring them into the city. And the same case, many people in Winnipeg have cottages or vacation properties that would have different rules in the city of Winnipeg, so they wouldn't be able to buy fireworks for those properties without a permit from within the city of Winnipeg. So it would, unless it's a provincial thing, it would be challenging to have that type of structure in place.
But here in the city of Winnipeg, businesses that do sell fireworks do require permits. To see a permit.
No,
Yeah.
they don't.
No, they don't.
No, because you could say you're buying the fireworks from many different places. So they provide education.
Okay.
And we've worked with them again, and all the information on what's required is available in the fireworks stores, but they don't have to show the permit.
These are the, or committee, these are the information sheets that are posted and provided at all sellers within the municipality.
We control like who sells them. Like there's clear like dealers, but there's also corner stores that sell them, right? So is there some sort of safety aspect or something that we can do, provisions around that?
I think we could look into it.
We can look into all of those things, but really the reality here, and I know we heard earlier from our first delegation around thoughts around enforcement, but the fact of the matter is this is currently an item that is controlled by bylaw. City has lots of different bylaws. We have all kinds of rules in the city, in the province that govern how people are to conduct themselves. And at the end of the day, it comes down to enforcement. And this particular bylaw has been a challenge for the department to enforce. And we need to look at different ways in order to enforce it appropriately so that we ensure that people that choose to not follow the bylaw can be held accountable. That's ultimately where we're at. No different than, you know, we're all required to wear our seat belts when we drive our vehicles. If we choose not to, there's repercussions. So We need to get to the point with this, and then it's not just about enforcement, it's the education piece too. And I think, Chief Gilmore demonstrated here in previous years where some focused efforts around the holiday season can pay good dividends in terms of what's occurring. But this does need to be a mixed approach between the enforcement and the education.
What about the point of sale? Because we're seeing like, I'll use like the bike registry as an example. Like we've been asking businesses that when you purchase a bike, you're going to right away put in the serial number so that it's been tallied. So what conversations would that look like if we were to ask at the point of sale? Like obviously we can only do within the city of Winnipeg, never mind what's happening outside city of Winnipeg. I'm just talking about inside city of Winnipeg. Is there not an opportunity that they do the education component, but then also permits need to be filed, or they can file it right there? Here's the paperwork. If you want to purchase a fireworks, then fill out this paperwork, and then they can send it on to you guys. Like, is there not somewhere at the point of sale that can also be useful or helpful?
But to Chief Gilmore's point earlier, there will be the option there for the individual to disclose that it's not for use in the city of Winnipeg.
Just on that, 'cause that's not a bad idea. Like, what if we had to have a contact, driver's license or an ID with their address? So then when we do say there is a call and it's to the address, one of the people that purchased it, you'd have some evidence and we would be able to then issue some sort of fine and stuff, because we have that kind of contact, right? Could we enforce that when they sell that would they have, we don't know where they're putting them off, but if it's within the city of Winnipeg and there's been a call to the same address that's purchased,
Or establishment of a database.
a database, yeah. Just go ahead.
Madam Chair, my issue with that, I think the public service has already addressed it, is that it would only work with the storefronts, and then things like vans where you sell fireworks in vans. There would be no jurisdiction for City of Winnipeg to. So then it would presumably send business the way of not bricks and mortar. So. And Madam Chair, since I'm speaking on this motion, I'm planning on voting against this motion because I don't think there's a budget for this. I think if the budget is to be created, it's going to be done probably through like recovery through fines. And I've seen models like that, recoveries through fines where the fines don't manifest.
Mhm.
And what happens then is that the city is having to pay for the program anyway. And on top of that, the fine, the cost recovery through fines then makes it that much more expensive to follow the process, follow the permit process. And so then you can have less compliance. I just think it's generally not a good direction to be heading in. If we were to say, let's update the bylaw to match Calgary's, to bring fines up to 1,000, that's something I'd be willing to support today. But I just think we're making a mountain out of a molehill, and we're creating ourselves, I think, more problems than we'll be solving if we continue down this path. And I've seen reports come forward, like the Airbnb report, for example. At first, it was just information, best practice, look at what other jurisdictions are doing. And every time it hits council, there's a higher threshold and there's a greater regulation. So I don't like the direction this is heading, and so I'm gonna vote no at this point. Because I'm guessing there isn't support at the table to say, like, let's just do what Calgary does and be done with it. So those are my thoughts for the record. I mean, in particular, the cultural sensitivity to, in some cultures it's important to use fireworks, and I think we're getting right into that, and that's going to be. I know it's been mentioned by the public service, but that's definitely going to be a consideration. I mean, there's cultural observances that are done across the city, like churches, for example, and exemptions to areas where secret areas and churches. So I don't want to get into that debate. I know we're talking about fireworks today, but I think it's heading in the wrong direction. So I'm ready to vote against this at this point.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Councilman. Those are definitely concerns I think we all understand. This is not actually a very easy easy solution. It doesn't seem like there is kind of a solution. We hear from delegates, they want to do one way or the other. Yeah, I honestly, I'm kind of leaning on you guys to kind of help me figure out what is that middle path, because I don't have an answer either. Go ahead, Counselor.
Just wanted to talk about some of the issues that were raised in delegation. So the idea of maybe creating a little bit of friction by maybe introducing a cost for the permit. What are your thoughts on that? I guess I'm seeing people aren't taking out permits anyway, so it just kind of drives it.
We have one instance as an example where someone was holding a bit of a fireworks display. They came and met with our team. They took out the permit. They actually gave us more than enough information, had us out to make sure it was done safely. Had the permit, and then they had a number of people show up at their event with their own fireworks, and we got a number of complaints from that one. And so if we add an extra cost to the permit, you know, the people that are coming to us to do the permit are often trying to make sure they're doing it as safely as possible already.
It's already kind of filtering out the people who are rule followers.
Yeah.
But not targeting the people who aren't. You go ahead. I have more questions, but go ahead.
Well, just one quick question. Is there a type of fire, like firecrackers are, like type of one that we could allow for celebrations, but not others, sort of curiosity? Like there's lots of different kinds,
Yeah.
right? So could we say no to a certain amount, certain kind?
We could certainly look at
Could look
different
at it.
types, yeah, like different different types of fireworks have different clearance requirements, so we could look at the lower clearance types being allowed. Ones that require higher clearance, not.
No, that's okay. So in the review of all the just different jurisdictions, I just wondered if you kind of took note of any trends, because I think, you know, with wildfire season and drought and changing climate, and even just, we know more now about how these things affect the natural world, and you know, considerations for how newcomers, like you mentioned, who live in conflict areas. Like I think we just know more now about the bigger picture of how fireworks affect communities, whether that's human communities or otherwise. So I just wondered, do you notice any trends in terms of the directions that other municipalities are going with their regulations?
It was a wide range. That's why we included it all. It varied significantly across the country. We did try to highlight a few things on page 2 there. So a lot of jurisdictions do have specific dates where fireworks are allowed, and then they're not allowed on any other date. In some instances, you don't even need a permit on those dates. In other instances, you still need a permit. So that seemed to be a big focus that kind of made it quieter for the rest of the year. So people are prepared for those dates. And then the rest of the time, it's much quieter. It would only be like professional or very larger kind of fireworks celebrations that would be known in advance. In some cases, they even have a registry for that. So you can look on the website and say like, oh, okay, this property is taken out a fireworks permit. That's what I'm hearing. It's allowed. Then again, it kind of just really just went across the range. There is the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs recommendation on the ban, and some cities have followed through with that. That would be a municipality decision. So we have seen that. Vancouver is an example of that one. But then others just have fines and various levels of fines and structures in place too. It would have been great if there was a really clear way a lot of people were moving, but that was not what we found in the jurisdictional scan. It was really all over.
Vancouver ban?
I think a couple years.
A couple years ago, several years. Have you spoken to them saying, has it been successful in banning, or are they still seeing calls for services with respect to fireworks? Are they still seeing some illegal activity?
I think they're still seeing some. One of the things that a ban does make easier is that any firework activity, if you have a ban, is then illegal. So right now, part of the challenge we have with the firework calls is that we do allow permits. So if someone calls in for fireworks, it could be permitted and legal and allowed. If you have a ban, it never is. So it's likely easier to know when to dispatch the force. Because never allowed. But there are a lot of challenges with the ban as well and enforcement of that.
With the recommendations, what exactly are you kind of just, are you wanting us to make a decision? Are you gonna come back and then we make a decision on what we want, or? It's kind of not like clear under the recommendations, kind of what you're,
I think if I can ask you.
yeah.
So we have a huge bylaw compensation plan where we're taking every single department's bylaws and we're gonna make it into one, I guess, plan, one department. And so I think I think on the last page, they had suggested a few, what they could do to revise the fire prevention bylaw, but then they won't come forward until the comprehensive plan is done in 2027. So it's kind of like it's status quo. They're gonna try to do some more education. They're gonna try to see if they can designate some employees that can work outside of the working hours to do some prevention enforcement under our current bylaws. And then in 2027, they'll come with some more work. So it is, I think in my mind, status quo right now, because I don't see a path moving forward. It's still a challenging file. Unless we kind of direct them to do something now, today, with bylaw changes today. Whether that's banning, whether that's, point of sale, I think what I'm hearing is maybe more enforcement. Well, we can't really do the enforcement piece because we're challenged already with resources.
What Calgary does.
It just increase the fine.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity to increase the fine from 500 to 1,000. I am open to that.
Full bans on consumer
What's that?
fireworks? No.
Hiring, I'm kind of with Janice, like we look at that with even our bylaws for encampments. It's just not working because you just have so many, right? So I'm fine with increasing the fees. I'd be interested to know if other cities do, like, there are different kinds of fireworks, right? If we could look at, something along that lines, but.
I think you still have to go out and figure out who, like,
We
are you
did it,
suggesting
we-
like you ban them from the sale, like certain fireworks need to be banned?
Yeah.
And you cannot sell them within Winnipeg, you can't sell certain fireworks in the stores? Can we do that?
Yeah, but then you go and get it from the truck.
Yeah.
But then if we're having fines, you can't, I don't know, this is a complex, that's why we're talking it out.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution here.
So what about this idea of a middle ground that you say on certain days, like maybe Canada Day and then the Diwali, and that they're allowed, but then at other times of the year, just kind of blanket prohibition on the consumer side, right? The professional side is always, like on the table, but then that would let you kind of maybe dedicate more resources to those specific days rather than kind of blanket all year. Is that an option?
Well, those are things we can look at, and this is part of, I know the recommendation is kind of broad here, but the hope is, again, November, we will have the bylaw enforcement strategy come forward. We then do the further work on what we found in terms of the jurisdictional scan, what we've heard here today. committee around some things that might be palatable. And then, we can come forward in the first quarter of 2027. With some firm recommendations. But I do believe it's going to be a combination of a number of things here. It's not just about enforcement, not just about education. And yes, there may be particular items that we could look at banning for sale within the municipality, but there again, it can be procured outside of the municipality. Like we already do that. Example, the bylaw stipulates sky lanterns are not permitted in the city of Winnipeg. Due to the issues with those devices. So we're already doing that, so we could expand that.
I do like that idea that, with Councillor Redwood. Which jurisdiction does that, where they only do certain times of the year, where it's permitted?
There's several. There's
Which jurisdictions do
some,
that?
some of them,
There's variations
Yeah.
of that
What do you-
within St. John's, Halifax, Ottawa, Toronto, London, Barrie, Thunder Bay, Niagara Falls, Brandon, Regina, Saskatoon, and North Vancouver.
Okay, so Brandon does it, where they have, you don't issue a permit, you're just basically allowing certain times of the year where fireworks is permissible. Is it throughout the entire city, or is it just?
Have Brandon, everybody has slightly different variations. So some of them still require a permit, some of them don't require a permit on those dates. They all have like, those were just the ones that have some sort of date implication in their fireworks
What is
bylaw.
that stated in the report?
Page
In the
8, and then
appendix too.
all the details will be in the,
Like, do we permit, do we allow them on private property? Like, can somebody get it? Like, what if we just only allow it on public property with a permit with a specialized person and try to get people to gather on those special dates instead of allowing it and then ban it on private property? Then we at least know that and then if something's going off in a community, you know that that's illegal, right? Yeah, because you'd have the permit for this block party or whatever, the local park.
we could certainly look at how that would look as well. Some private property is like an individual residence. There's very few that qualify, but then there's private property that's, owned by an organization or even like community groups or schools and stuff like that. People will rent those fields. And that still qualifies as a private property. So if you're sending them off at school, you have to have permission from that community center or that school field. And so those are, and then we did consult with Public Works and Parks, and they were asking for a 500-meter buffer for many of the dog parks as well, because they run into problems every time.
Yes.
So
we just ban it.
No. Some cities don't actually allow it on any public property because they feel people are less responsible on the public property and it causes more damage. And
We saw that last year. Litter from.
Yeah. Like, there's a lot of variations of the rules across places.
I think what you're suggesting, I think that's a good start, right?
Yeah.
Only allowing it on special occasions.
Well, because it allows you then to focus your resources during those times and then the rest of the year, kind of the benefit as a band, which is that if there's a firework activity, you know right away that it's against the rule.
Fireworks only allowed on certain dates. I see it here. Fireworks permitted within specific dates, sold leading up to variations include fireworks. Okay, so so now I think we've come to kind of somewhat of a solution that we've dumbed it down to what this committee could potentially look at. But then you do require a little bit more jurisdictional scan and consultation with Aline, right? And then consultation with the fire chiefs, and then maybe consultation within all the other departments, because I think we talked about buffer zones and stuff. Could we just take that piece out and then just have you go and do a little bit more research and then come back and say, I don't know, 180, 200 and some days. We're not going to do anything this year. I think this year is just status quo, but I think it's just, could we just do more research? Is that a fair comment, path moving forward? Because I think we're seeing some alignment on, fireworks only allowed on certain dates.
I do support the Muir Dog Parks. I've been too often one of the ones searching for a dog after fireworks. So,
I would just say about the certain date, it makes enforcement incredibly challenging on those dates. Right. So if the challenge, and in Winnipeg, we do see fireworks clustered around very specific dates usually. The enforcement on those dates, very hard, if those are the only dates, because everybody's allowed to do it. We could certainly look at the options around that, and it makes it a lot easier to enforce other times of the year, because again, fireworks aren't allowed now, so then you know that.
what if we only allow them with permits on those days?
We could do that, that's still what we do now.
Like,
So,
like
yeah.
professional, you mean a professional displays rather than?
Yeah.
I think we would probably want to allow professional displays throughout the year. Those are done very carefully.
Yes.
They're well safety structured. It would be things like the gold eyes, whiteout parties that you would also be not allowing if you didn't allow for professional displays.
Okay, so okay.
Councilor Lord, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I was thinking of stopping this now.
What, and just going status quo? Because that's what it is, basically would be status
Yeah,
quo.
we're bring our fee schedule up to Calgary and call it a win, because we've harmonized with, inflation. And we allow the paramedic service to continue doing what they've been doing. So enforcement is going to be an issue, like. That's why, we can feel good about ourselves for voting for something that's got no teeth, which is gonna be what it is. And if it has teeth, and if it's if the cost recovery fee is put on the industry, then we're going to punish the good actors. And you're gonna reduce the amount of people who are complying, because right now it's affordable to comply. So if you say cost recovery and all of a sudden it's $10,000 to use fireworks, some people are gonna just use the firework instead of getting the permit and going through the process like they are today.
Well, how about we then increase the fines today and then maybe report back on how that's doing? And then we can make a decision.
Well, if everybody's okay with Calgary, then, for those who are concerned about fireworks, then we've, doubled.
Are we similar to Calgary?
Calgary has, I believe, a multi-structure approach.
What's Calgary's, what page is that?
It's page 5. They start with 500, it's up to 1,000, and then to a maximum of 100,000. So a number of jurisdictions had like a tiered approach. So if you're setting off fireworks without a permit, it's 500. If you're setting them near a building, it's an extra 250. If you're setting them late at night, or if you're a youth, or if you're intoxicated, it just kept building. So in Calgary, you can get up to 100,000 with one set off, but like it's a very tiered approach. I don't have all the details on that here.
Based on the jurisdictional scan, to me, it looks like fireworks are only allowed by trained and certified professionals with permits.
In Calgary?
Yeah. Not unclear on what the sort of baseline rules in Calgary are.
Well, then if we go to certified professionals, then you're getting into cultural issues, because people participate who are not professionals.
Well, some of these cities though, they have a large,
I mean, I guess,
cultural-
Madam Chair, I don't know if there's a will, but maybe there isn't. If there isn't, I'll pull it, but just move this report as. That would be my motion. If committee's interested, if not, I'll pull it.
So if we move it as information, then what happens? The report comes back in 2027?
No, it ends.
Yeah, no bylaw
okay.
changes.
Right.
And they just continue.
And
status
if any
quo.
one of you want to do a deep dive and come forward with, regulatory framework, we could entertain it then.
I just go back to. So I don't know, Councilor, if you get any complaints on fireworks,
Well, I've got people who want fireworks.
right? So you're on the other side of the spectrum.
Well, I'm on the side of the spectrum where people want to have fireworks, yes.
Yeah, and I
And
think,
making it harder for them is not going to be something that they're pleased with.
so
and then-
your
and then the-
community,
and then the
your, so
cultural-
I guess we could say it's we're just putting on ward hats here now, not looking at citywide. So what are you saying is,
Wow.
within your community, you've got residences who are supportive of shooting fireworks
They want
in
more,
residential area, and they wanna do it more.
yeah,
Okay, but then you've got other areas like Janice,
yeah,
mine, Counselor Sharma's, who, do shoot off fireworks, exactly what they're doing, but then you've got residences who have PTSD, who have dogs, that are seniors, saying that they're shooting them off at 2 AM on a Sunday night. And I have to field those calls, and what do I tell the residents is, oh, you know what I mean? Because you
Yeah.
can't send a police officer out there, you can't send a fire prevention officer out there. Education's not working. And we've seen an incident in Edmonton where they shot it off and one of the houses went off fire. So we are trying to be more proactive,
Yeah.
but we don't have. So remaining status quo, I'm gonna challenge you, remaining status quo is not working for 3 or 4 of the wards
yeah.
in Winnipeg.
Well, then I will take my motion back.
So what
I'm not
if
moving information.
what if we kind of took another day, did a little study group? And took another day where we can take a deeper dive into this?
So do we
And
wanna
come back.
lay this over?
Yeah, I kind of would like to, or that we get together again, but
I'll support a layover.
Yeah. Cause it just doesn't seem like we have an answer.
I don't have an answer, but I do understand,
Yeah.
like, yeah, like we need
Well, then
something.
let's lay it over until first quarter 2027. It's not saying information, it's saying we wanna take a look when the timing is propitious, is good. And kind of at the same time as the final report would be ready for.
Or we have a little working group that kind of takes a deeper dive into this and comes back with some recommendations.
So when would you like to lay this over to?
It was your motion. I mean,
Okay,
I can move it.
Okay, so we don't wanna do, yeah, so,
so
okay, I agree.
So when
The
is
item
the
number 1,
first
reporting
quarter?
back with enforcement options based on, so we don't wanna do that.
I'm Chair, I would have a motion, might work, so.
What's that?
So I move that we defer this conversation until first quarter 2027. Mr. Clerk,
First quarter.
it's just like deferring the item, like not dealing with it today. Deferring it till then,
But
first
I
quarter
like the
2027.
working group scenario.
yeah.
Are there volunteers? Are you
Oh,
volunteering?
yeah, no,
I will.
I'm the chair, I'm happy to do a
Yes.
working group.
For a little bit.
Okay, well then, if you guys are
Just a
gonna
couple of
recommend
meetings,
something.
I don't think it'll be long, like,
Just for certainty's sake, if I may recommend March of 2027.
Okay.
That's the end of the first quarter and it gives some certainty to the planning.
So Madam Chair, I move to delay to defer this until first quarter 2027, which would give the time for a working group.
But I would prefer, yeah, can we have some language in there that talks about working group?
Establishing working groups is a little bit complicated and that
Okay.
you need terms of reference, a specific.
You can do it
You can do it in.
Informally?
yeah.
Okay, well, we've got it on the record that we're gonna do an informal working group. And then
So-
hopefully by the first quarter, we'll have an amending motion that kind of direct the public service on a path moving forward on how to deal with this.
Yes, it's good,
Yeah, I think that's good.
it's good, there's,
All right.
Is Councillor Gilroy or Larkin in this motion?
Lord can do.
okay, so
Yeah, it's not an easy topic.
No, it's not.
It's not. You know,
and if
I don't pretend to know the answers, and I think this can have some kind of internal working group with Deputy Chief Lisa, that would be greatly appreciated. And we can have Aline at the table as well. Hopefully after some good conversations, we can come up with a solution. But for now, status quo. Okay, and then
all right,
This is laid over.
kind of, yeah, it's
Okay.
a bit of a
And in the
layover.
meantime, we'll-
Yeah.
Work together.
And I think the work that I think on page 8. Right, can you still move ahead with that? I think you've said here. Designated employees means fire and paramedic chief of the city and any employee or FEMA have delegated writing and to enforce or administer part of the bylaw. And then in effort to increase enforcement, delegation would be provided to operational. The last two paragraphs, 24/7 providing greater opportunity. We could still do that
Can do
work.
that.
You can still continue on with that work, right? Okay. I think that's kind of an interim, try it out for summer of 2026 and then see what happens. Yeah. And you're still collecting data anyways on the calls for service? Yeah, okay. So they're still gonna do that kind of interim stuff in 2026. And then we'll have our offline working group and see what we can come up with in March of 2027.
Did we move that or did we vote on it?
You move it, but we haven't voted, no.
All in favor?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's carried.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, and move consent agenda in German by Counselor Gilroy at 12:00 PM. All those in favor?
Thank you.
What?